Hello everybody and welcome to Chapter 17. This is Unit 7 and we're going to be covering GUI Programming Basics. And here's what we're going to cover. As you can see, we've got a lot of different things to go over. The nice thing is though, is once you got a feel for one of them, the rest of them are very similar. So there's some nuances on a couple things that we're going to talk about in this section in the additional GUI concepts too. But other than that, like all these different components, they're all pretty easy, so it's not going to be too bad. So in case you were unaware, GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. And although companies still write text-based programs for internal use, most companies write GUI-based programs for things that they're going to be using externally, things that they sell to customers. With the exception being there's still a lot of console-based stuff in math and science, where maybe you're writing Python scripts to analyze data sets. You may not have a GUI interface for that. GUI programs usually use event-driven programming techniques. And the basic idea behind an event-driven programming is that the program waits for events to occur and then responds. An event is a message that tells the program that something has happened. For example, if the user clicks a button, then the event is generated and it tells the program that a particular button was clicked. More formally, when the user clicks a button, we say that the button object fires an event. So let's look at a few more examples of event firing. In each example, notice the objects that are firing the event. So, for example, a user presses the Enter key while inside of a text box. Well, this text box fires an event that tells the program that the Enter key was pressed in the text box. Or we have clicking on a menu item, or clicking on the X button. They all have corresponding events that happen. If an event is fired and you want your program to handle the fired event, then you need to create a listener for that event. For example, if you want your program to do something when the user clicks a particular button, you need to create a listener for the button. If an event is fired and there's no listener listening to it, then the fired event is never heard and there's no response to it. On the other hand, if there is a listener listening for the fired event, then the listener will hear the event and the program will then respond to the fired event. The way the program responds is by executing a chunk of code known as an event handler. We're going to come back to this topic of event handling and event listening, but before we get into that, we need to talk about some of the built-in GUI classes and packages that Java comes with. Now, with most things in programming, try not to reinvent the wheel. Java has lots of pre-built classes for you to use when developing GUI-based programs. For example, JButton you can use whenever you need a button, and you can use the color class when you need to define colors for your components. Now, in the first Java compiler, JDK 1.0, all GUI classes were bundled into one library known as the Abstract Windowing Toolkit, or AWT. The AWT's component classes were less than ideal in terms of portability, so Sun developed a set of more portable GUI components and put them into a new GUI library named Swing. And Swing was released in Java 2 SE 1.2. Now, I've included this graphic for another reason as well. Java versioning naming has been problematic over the years. It can be extremely confusing when talking about the different versions. So here they all are in a nutshell. You can see we started off with JDK 1.0, and then we had 1.1 and 1.2, but notice here they stopped calling it the JDK and they started calling it the Java 2 SE, right? And then so we've got the J2SE 1.2, 1.3, so on and so forth. And then we get up to, for some reason here in 2004, we just jump up to calling it Java 5, right? And that's kind of the normal convention, except for here it's still called J2SE. So in 2006, they start calling it Java and SE6. And then so we have all of those versions going up to Java SE10. And we continue with that to this day. And they're currently on a 6-month release cycle now, where Java 11 is going to be coming out in about 6 months. The Swing library adds a lot of functionality to the Abstract Windowing Toolkit, or AWT, but it does not replace the AWT entirely. Today, Java GUI application programmers use both libraries, Swing and the AWT. So get used to importing these 3 packages in almost all of your GUI programs. Now I also want to point out that right here, .event is a sub-package and it must be imported separately. So to the compiler, these 2 things right here are completely different, even though you've got the java.awt package and then you got the java.awt.event package, right? So these are different even though event is a sub-package. Just know that the compiler, if you just try to import this one and you're going to use an event, it's not going to recognize it as being included. So you actually need to include both of these. So here we can see our first window program example, right? We have a simple window that extends the J-frame, and we're going to talk about that coming up. And we're going to specify a height and width, and then we have our constructor where we set certain properties about our window. Then we have a method called create contents, and in it we create a label and we call add label, and we're going to talk about all this. And then we simply, in our main method, we simply call new simple window. And when we call new simple window, the constructor, that is going to create our window, and when we set the visibility to true, that's when it actually shows up. So if we go ahead and run it, you can see here we have our simple window. And all it consists of is a label called just label, and in it we pass in the text of the label, right? And so you can see it says, "Hi, I'm Larry the label." And that's it. That is all our window does at this point. Now, the cornerstone to any Swing GUI program is the JFrame class. And you saw that in the demo that we just had. And it's the super class, so you'll need to extend it if you create your own GUI program. In order to use it, we must first import the Java Swing library or package. And once we do that, now the JFrame class is called a container class because, well, it contains things like labels and buttons and menus, right? And the JFrame is derived from the container class. Additionally, it implements all of the standard window features such as a border, a title bar, minimize and maximize and close window buttons, and the ability to resize the window. The API for the JavaFrame class includes quite a few methods that you'll get used to using. First, there's the setTitle method, which tells the window what to display in the title bar. The setSize method allows you to specify the size of your window in pixels. The setLayout method specifies the layout manager the window uses. And we're going to cover layouts in Chapter 18. So it's not critical that you understand it right now, but you're going to get to it next week. Then we also have the close default operation method, which is what will enable the close button functionality to work on the container. Additionally, we have a few more methods to take a look at. The add method adds specified component to the window. Once a component is added to the window, it stays with the window for the life of the program. Once we add a component, we need to set the frame or window's visibility to true in order to see it. Additionally, we can set a frame's visibility to false to hide it as well. So let's take a look at this in another application. Okay, I kind of lied. It's not another application. I meant to say that we're going to come back to the simple window now that we've gone over the APIs. So here you can see the set title, the set size, and the set layout. And again, we're going to cover layouts in chapter 18, so don't worry about that. Also, this set default close operation tells us how to make sure that this little X button up here works properly. This right here simply calls the local private method create contents, which is going to add all the items to our container, and then we set the visibility to true. And that's it. If you don't set the visibility to true, you're going to create a window, but it's not going to be visible. So now that you got a feel for the basics, let's start looking at some more of the components that you can use in your window application. In addition to JFrame components, we have lots of other options to add functionality to our application. We'll cover some of these, but not all. Once you have an idea of how to use them, it's very easy to figure out the rest. Of course, in order to use them, you must import them using their package, either individually or as the entire package. Each of these components are descendants of JComponent, which means you'll have access to adjust the following properties: foreground and background colors, text font, the border appearance, tooltips, and also if the item has focus or not. A JLabel is a read-only component. The user can read the label's message, but cannot update it. Additionally, the JLabel is a single line component, so there's no new lines or /ns that you can use. Implementing a label is a two-step process. First, we instantiate a JLabel object, and we don't have to set the label's text at this point. It's optional, but you'll often know ahead of time what you want the label to say, so this is a convenient way or place to do it. Next, we simply add the component to the window or JFrame object. Finally, don't forget that we need to import the JLabel class with the JavaX Swing package. As I said, setting the label text was optional. You can also use the set text method to set the text at any point, and you can also get the text that's on the label using the getText method. Let's look through one more component, and then we'll take a look at another example program, and that'll be it for this video. A JTextField component allows a user to type information into a text box. And creating a text box is very similar to a label. First, we create the object, like such. Then we add it to the window. And of course, we have to import it using the JavaX Swing package. So as you can see, there's really not that much difference between the label and the text field, except for the text field has default text that you can specify, and you can also specify the width of the text field. However, the JTextField object has quite a few more methods than the label object, and so here's some of the more common ones. And of course, you could always look at the Java docs for a complete list, but like I said, these are some of the more prevalent ones, like getText will return the text that is inside the text box that a user types in, or you can set the text, which is to something to be inside of the text box. You can also set whether or not you want the text box to be editable. If you want to lock it out, you can set that to false. And then you can also make it visible or not. And then you can also add an action listener, so you can define what's going to happen when a user presses enter inside the text box or some other combination of events. And we're going to get more into that coming up.
So here we have the greeting program, and this is going to demonstrate text boxes and labels. And basically what's going to happen is when the user enters a text box or presses enter in the text box value displays at the bottom or in the bottom label, right? So as you can see here, we're importing our 3 packages that we say you're usually going to have to import. And then we are extending the JFrame class with our greeting class. And we're specifying some initial sizes for our window, right? We're giving it a width of 325 and a height of 100. And then we're creating, we are declaring a text field called name box and a text box, or excuse me, a label called greeting. Then in our constructor, we're going to set the title of our window. We're going to set the size. Notice how we're using constants. So if we ever need to change it, we just got to change it up here. We're specifying our standard flow layout and our standard default close operation. Then we're calling the create contents method, and then we're setting visibility to true. So we come down to our create contents method, and we are creating a label called name prompt, and it's saying, what's your name? We're setting the default text to that, right? Then, remember, name box and greeting were already created up here, right? Name box greeting, okay? So we are assigning them to a new text field with 15 characters, which is the width of it. And we're also creating a new label called greeting. Then we're adding those 3 things to our frame. Notice that we are not specifying a label for our greeting yet. Okay, so it's blank, it's empty, there's nothing in it. Finally, we are adding an action listener to our name box, which is the text box we're going to type into. And we create a new listener. Here we have a inner class for event handling, and we're going to talk more about this later. But this is what's going to be used to handle the event when somebody hits enter. So if we look at what happens here, we have this class listener that implements this action listener interface. And so it has this method called action performed, and we declare a string called message, and we set it equal to glad to meet you, and then we get the text of whatever's in the name box, and then we add an exclamation point. And then we set the text in the name box to blank, right? And then in our greeting, we set the text to whatever we built this message out to be. And then we have our main method, which is actually going to call our class constructor, right? And then it's going to create the window and then make it visible. So if we run it, all right, let me go ahead and bring this over here. It says, what is your name? And I'm going to type in Corey. Oops, apparently caps lock is on. Corey. Glad to meet you, Corey. Notice how it blanked out the text box because we said that that's what it was going to do right here. And it said, glad to meet you, Corey. So it did exactly what it's going to do. And it's all based on when we hit enter. And so this is actually, this action listener is just listening for the enter key. And that's part of the action listener implementation. So anytime you get an event, notice how we're not using this action event E. We're going to look at how you can use that in the future. But right now, this is just a very simple way to set up a quick demo of an actual functioning GUI program. Right? Hi, Bob. All right.